Guys, it's no secret electric vehicles are expensive, but if you've got 120 grand or so to spend on one, I think I found the perfect option. No, Jody, not that one. Of course, I'm talking about the 2022 BMW iX. It's got decent range, tons of tech, and when you peel back that icy exterior, there's even a bit of value to find inside. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Guys, this is every Canadian kid's dream. Not only am I driving a Zamboni, this one is all electric. The only noise you can really hear, the electric motor and the studded tires on the ice. That is it. This is so cool. I'm at the City of Mississauga's Iceland Arena. There's 4 rinks here. And the Zambonis, they're all electric. Got rid of the gas fleet in a zero emissions initiative. I don't know much about the emissions, but I can tell you the cool factor is so high. This is a blast. I really dig it because, you know, electrification, it isn't just about private use vehicles. It's not about what you're driving or what I'm driving. It's about stuff like this. If you can convert commercial fleets like this one into a zero emissions fleet, I think that's kind of the future. I think that's the direction we all need to be headed. So it's really cool to see the City of Mississauga taking this initiative. These things run about 120 grand, so about the same as that BMW iX. And I gotta tell you, they seem happy. I'm certainly happy. This is so cool. Look, around the world, and in North America specifically, because that's where we are, there are zero emission vehicle targets that mean in Canada, by 2035, the government wants no gas powered vehicles on the market. And in the States, I think it's 50% of the market for passenger vehicles, light trucks and cars. You know the deal. Those are supposed to be zero emission as well, which means electric vehicles are coming whether you like it or not. But the good news is there is a lot to like about this iX. No, I'm not just saying that because it's new and fancy, though it is those things too, but it's actually really nice to drive. It's really good. And I do think there is some decent value. Yes, even in this one I'm driving, that's priced at about 120 grand before tax with all the options that have been added. Now, the base version starts at about 82 grand before tax in Canada. This xDrive 50 version, it starts at 92 grand. But like I said, it's got a whole whack of options, but there is some good value here, because it feels like a showpiece. It feels like a piece of technology, but it also feels fundamentally sound. And a big reason why is this new electric platform that BMW has rolled out. It's got this really cool aluminum space frame with this carbon fiber reinforced polymer body. It's also got all these thermoplastic panels, aluminum everywhere. It's very cool, it's very light, and it's very stiff. But the neat thing about this is you can't feel the stiffness or the weight of the battery pack. That's one of those things in an electric vehicle you can really notice. And in here, it's not all that noticeable. Yes, you still can feel it down low, but it's just not the same. I have never driven an electric vehicle that both hides its weight so well and just feels so kind of nimble and lively. It feels light. This is still a heavy vehicle, but it does a really good job of hiding that. And that also lends to this sense of reassurance in a weird way. If you're coming from a gas-powered vehicle, this is your first foray into electrification, it's not gonna feel as foreign as you might think. And I personally do believe that is one of those stumbling blocks for a lot of people, because often we are afraid of what we don't know. And this takes that fear out of the equation completely. Now, about the battery, in practice, it's about 105 kilowatt hours. Yes, it spans virtually the entire floor between the wheels. It's really neat the way it's set up, just like any other electric vehicle, but it's really dense. And that means that this thing can charge at speeds up to 200 kilowatts. And at home on a level 2 charger, you can charge overnight in about 11 hours, I think BMW says. And then if you hook up to one of those DC fast chargers, you can go from 10 to 80% in about half an hour. And I do have to say, charging speeds have been impressive. Now, this is early spring, which is pretty ideal in terms of ambient temperature. I don't know if you guys watched my Hyundai Ioniq 5 review, but I highly recommend you do. And not just because I have some great things to say, but I do think it's a great vehicle too. But that was a wintertime test, and I did have some issues with sluggish charging time, which is common with EVs, but here I have not had that at all. I hooked up to a 50 kilowatt charger the other day. It's plugged in for about an hour, and I went from 53% to 99%. That's pretty solid stuff, in my opinion. Even this morning, right before Will and I met, I hooked up to a charger just to top up before we started shooting. I was plugged in for maybe 40 minutes, and I went from 86% to 99%. And don't forget, that last 20% always takes the longest. And usually, EV owners are going to tell you that they don't even charge that last little bit because of battery degradation. I personally don't think it's such a big issue, and especially for someone like me, I've got a lot to do today, and we need to make sure we have as much juice as possible. So I top up right to the top, and even then, 40 minutes is not too bad, again, on a 50 kilowatt charger. And then as far as the drive goes, yes, you can tell it's electric, but it's actually really smooth, really reassuring, and there's no real adjustment period, no learning curve to driving this thing as far as the basics go. Now, there's more to the story, of course, and we will get to those, but as far as the fundamentals, it's just a SUV. Now, when I went for my evaluation drive the other day, which I always tell you guys about, it was about 220 kilometers in this iX because I picked up at BMW, and I used 19.2 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which is about 5 better than it's rated for. Again, it's springtime. That's kind of ideal conditions, but I was really impressed because of how relatively poorly I did recently in the Ioniq 5. That 19.2 is very impressive. And after that, a lot of city driving, it's been way down. After I charged the other day, cruising around town, I was down in the 12s. That is incredibly impressive. Now, this one has about 500 kilometers of range officially, the xDrive 50. If you go with the base version, it's only got about 320 kilometers of range, but I do have to say, I've been doing a lot better than the official rating. When I picked it up, it was showing about 580 kilometers of range, which was impressive on its own. But then after that first charge, it jumped to 620 kilometers because, of course, it adjusts for the way that you drive. And I'm not necessarily a hyper miler. I just kind of know what I'm doing. I know how to make sure that I'm not being too aggressive with the throttle, that I'm utilizing the regenerative brakes properly. I really do get the most out of these vehicles, but it just goes to show you that I do think this thing is maybe just a little bit underrated, which is a good thing because that 600 kilometer range, that's kind of what I talked about in the Ioniq 5 video about what would be that ideal that I think more people would be willing to get on board with electrification. It's a good round number. Now, with the dual motor setup here, because it is all-wheel drive, so there's an electric motor for the front wheels and a separate one for the rear. This thing makes 516 horsepower and 564 pound-feet of torque. Very smooth, very effortless. I like how easy it is to engage with this vehicle. So if you do want to drive quickly, you can do that no problem, even in just the normal drive mode. When you get your foot down, this thing really hustles, but it's also cool just how easy it is to drive normally, efficiently. If you're just cruising around casually, it's very easy to do that too. It's also got adjustable regenerative braking, which is really cool. And of course, it's got that battery mode, so it can come to a complete stop on its own. Classic one pedal driving. You come up to a light, you let your foot off, and it will come to a dead stop. That's neat. It's also pretty normal these days. If I did have one complaint about it, it would be this. I really prefer vehicles that have either a steering wheel paddle like you get from Hyundai, or just a setting like you get in the Mustang Mach-E. You can hit it, it says one pedal driving. It's very clear and obvious. Nissan and BMW, they use this battery setting that you shift down into it instead of drive. It's just a little bit confusing, and I'd like to see something a little more standardized, but obviously that is a very minor complaint. So like I said, there's no real learning curve to the general drive, but there is one to all the controls. And it's that classic oversimplification that automakers love with modern electric vehicles, but it can just be very confusing. Just take this control down here on the console. This is your drive setting shortcut, but it's just a car on a stack of, I don't know, 3 textbooks or something like that. It's very strange. You wouldn't know it without cracking the owner's manual. Now, I will say, BMW drivers, you are going to have a bit of an advantage because some of this is just going to feel familiar. But generally speaking, this is a much different vehicle than virtually anything else. And that is by design, but I do find it at least a little bit frustrating. The same goes with a bunch of the advanced driver aids. This does have the driver assistance package, and that allows it to have some semi-autonomous capability. Now, you do have to keep your hands on the wheel. That is very important, but the adaptive cruise control is very advanced. It'll even change lanes on its own. All you have to do is activate the signal. But it's boiled down to this very basic setup where you hit this button and you can choose between either just distance control, which is adaptive cruise control, or the advanced driver assist setting. But there aren't a bunch of buttons for lane keep assist or any of that stuff. That's all through the infotainment screen. It's a bit of a disappointment the way everything is grouped in like that, because I prefer to have physical buttons. Even if you take a look at traction control, there's no button here for me to turn that off. So I do wish they weren't so simplified to the point of being overcomplicated. But generally speaking, it shouldn't take you too long to get the hang of this thing. As far as the rest of the stuff goes in here, well, it is, again, fairly straightforward. Like the infotainment system, I would call it good, but not great. That is one of my favorite ways to describe infotainment that I like for the most part, but that isn't always easy to use. That's very much the case here. You've got these shortcuts on the home screen, as well as some icons on the left, so you can pull up Apple CarPlay, for example, very easily. But where you run into issues is when you hit this menu button and you get this absolute wall of icons. It's like an iPad where you're just scrolling through all of the various functions. And again, it can be very difficult to find what you're looking for, especially because the seat adjustment, well, you do have some on the door here, but they're just basic. You can move forward, you can lift the bottom, you can lean back, all of that stuff. But if you want to adjust the lumbar, you have to do that through here. And when I first got in, I couldn't find the setting. It's this seat comfort icon. Another thing about seat comfort, this one has some upgrades, like I mentioned, including a massaging driver's seat. Pretty cool, right? There isn't one for the passenger. That to me is a little bit odd. I don't know about you guys. My girlfriend would be pretty bitter if we were on a road trip and I was having a nice and comfortable massage while she was stuck with nothing beside me. So that's a little bit odd. And then I have had some issues with this booting me off of CarPlay. This has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and hooking up was very easy, which isn't always the case with BMW, so I was pleasantly surprised. But then after a couple days, it just wouldn't reconnect, and then the audio wouldn't work either. It said there was no source, but I actually had it on satellite radio. So there are some oddities. Maybe it's just an update away. But then everything else, again, like I said off the top, it feels like a technological showpiece, including this roof. Take a look, it's glass, but it's one of those monochromic things. So I can actually hit this button and dim it, hit it again, and it lets more light in. And I don't know if you guys remember, but I've complained about that in the past. Vehicles that have these roofs that either don't have a cover or aren't adjustable. They either let too much light in or not enough. Now, Will in the back, he's not so thrilled because it is a little dark in here on a day like today, but outside of filming, it's actually very comfortable this way. Again, it's just a cool piece of technology that helps this thing stand out. Now, this is an electric vehicle, and that means some liberties were taken as far as what you interact with. It goes beyond the controls too. Not all of it is bad news. This is an electric vehicle though. Automakers like to reinvent those. So take a look at the dash. There's no mechanical components to worry about, so it sits really low. All of it is below the cowl line. That means outward visibility vastly improved, but then some of the other stuff, very head scratching. Take a look at the door releases. They're buttons. No matter how many times I get in and out of this thing, I still find myself fumbling for the right switch. That's very annoying. And then in general, it's just kind of weird the way it works. Now, BMW likes this thing where it's not on even though it is, and then it's not off when you think it is. It's kind of weird. I've tried to fiddle with the settings in the infotainment system. No real luck. So right now it looks like it's on, but it's actually not, because if I want to turn this thing on, I have to put my foot on the brake pedal and hit that start-stop button. As soon as I let my foot off, it turns off. Now I can still interact with the infotainment system, that's fine, but if I want to do stuff like open the window, no can do. I can't even close the tailgate from the back of the vehicle. It's very annoying how that all works. I don't really know why automakers love to reinvent electric vehicles, but that's the case here. Though I do have to say, it's not all bad inside this iX. As much as I despise getting out of this thing, getting in isn't so bad. And no, it's not because of these door releases. It's because of how low it is and how wide the doors open, especially in the back. There's a ton of room in here too. That I very much appreciate. I also appreciate this bench. It's one of the most comfortable I've ever sat on. One of the most comfortable back seats this side of the executive lounges you can get in something like the Mercedes S-Class. I loved it. I know Will liked it earlier too. Something neither of us like? The cargo room. Big, thick body panels back here means there's not much space. There's only 500 liters behind the back seats. That's about what you get in a compact hatchback. Now, it does get much better from there. Fold down that 40-20-40 split folding back seat that you guys know I absolutely love. You get 1,750 liters. That's nice, but behind the seats, not so great. Now, it is a wide opening. It's a little bit high, not too bad. It's just that narrowness that causes issues. And then as far as the styling goes, the proportions, I actually don't mind them. Now, as one friend put it, this thing is pretty anonymous. If you took the badge off the back, you wouldn't even know it was a BMW. That's not necessarily a criticism, just commentary. And overall, I gotta say that front end is pretty ugly, but at least it matches up with the rest of the design. Two people have said to me separately, this thing kind of has a futuristic Honda Odyssey vibe to it. And I gotta agree, but I don't necessarily hate it. It's just that grille I cannot get over. To recap, I like the easy to drive attitude of the BMW iX, the good range in this xDrive 50 version, and all the tech and features you can get with it that really make it feel special. I don't like the bucktooth grille, the narrow cargo area, or the learning curve that comes with the controls inside. Believe it or not, it can be hard to talk so casually about value in the context of a vehicle that can cost upwards of 6 figures, but that's what I keep landing on with this iX xDrive 50. And in that way, it's kind of like the value you get with a Grand Seiko watch. Yeah, it can cost as much as some Rolexes, and it kind of looks like a regular Seiko to an untrained eye, but what you're getting for the money is a pretty phenomenal product. That's exactly how I feel about this iX, from the way it drives to the range it has, and yes, all the tech and features inside. If you can live with that grille and the way it all works, this is a pretty outstanding SUV, electric or otherwise.